Return of the welcome call.
Well, the way I got involved in this issue was through some constituents of mine coming to me and complaining about the fact that they were receiving frequent silent telephone calls and having no way of finding out where they were coming from. So as their Member of Parliament, I looked into this and was fairly staggered really to find out they were coming from some pretty big companies and business interests who were telephoning my constituents, their customers, and leaving them with a very silent and disturbing telephone call.
I think, like most members of Parliament, I got involved because of constituency pressure, of constituents writing to me and saying how troubled they were by the number of nuisance calls and the growth in the number of nuisance calls. And then, of course, as a Shadow Minister, this is part of my area of responsibility, and we've been asking questions of the Minister and trying to get the rules revised.
But what really struck home to me was when a couple of years ago BT came to see me, a huge corporation begging for more regulation around this issue. Now, when a big business comes to and asks for more regulation, you know there's something wrong.
The important thing is this, is that if people are tense when they pick up the phone because they want to resist whatever's being said there, then it gets to a stage where, regardless of whether there's TPS or whatever scheme there may be, you won't be able to actually sell things via the phone. So making sure the phone call is welcome, making sure the experience is something that people actually welcome is very important for both the recipient of the call and those making the calls.
I was really surprised when I started looking into this phenomenon of corporate nuisance calls, as I dubbed them, to find out just how prevalent it was, and that really there were hundreds of thousands of these calls being generated all the time from some quite respectable business organisations. And I couldn't really understand why any business organisation would want to go out of its way to antagonise its potential customers. Because in my view as a politician, I think that marketing is a perfectly legitimate business, but what isn't legitimate is to do what we used to do when I was a small boy, and that's knock on people's doors and run away, which is effectively what the industry was doing in a technological way. So I was very surprised, if you like, by the prevalence of it, and also quite shocked that the industry didn't seem really to understand that it was destroying itself by this activity.
I think actually the rules which Ofcom have introduced are going to be more important than the fines. I think what's important is that people will always know who is calling them, they'll be able to do a callback aspect, and so that if they are concerned where the call has come from, they can simply find out very quickly who's behind it, and that they'll be required to be caller identification. So I think that's a big step forward. I think what's upset people most is just simply not knowing who is calling them, and therefore is it a troublemaker or what is it?
The problem is, though, I think that in a way, if you like, the puddle has been so poisoned, the ever evaporating puddle of consumers, if you like, has been so poisoned by some of the activity that it'll take quite a lot to restore public confidence in this kind of telesales. Nevertheless, the Direct Marketing Association did organise a conference which they invited me to speak at, because in the meantime I'd introduced a 10-minute rule bill in Parliament in a way to really raise awareness of the issue and try and get the government and Ofcom in particular to take this issue more seriously. And what struck me was that the Direct Marketing Association were very keen, if you like, to address this issue, because I think they understood that effectively the industry would destroy itself unless it really addressed the issue.
Clearly the DMA, I think, will be doing a great deal to make its own members aware of the new rules, and therefore that will be extremely helpful for them. If they've got any questions, any doubts, they can come back to you for clarification. I think the problem may be for people who aren't members of the DMA, perhaps some of the international callers, and that they simply may not be aware of these rules. Once a complaint is made, I think they'll be warned by Ofcom, and if they then persist, if they don't change their procedures, then action will be taken against them.
Obviously, as the cost of international calling has gone down, either over the internet or otherwise, that means that where the call centre is in the world doesn't have the same implications as it used to. Now, obviously, it's harder to regulate what's happening in the Asian subcontinent when people are phoning here than, say, people in England or in France. And hence, there is a considerable threat from abroad that will undermine jobs in the UK.
I think the DMA has a tightrope to walk. On the one hand, you've got all your members who are looking for certain things for you, and rightly you've introduced a telephone preference service, and there are things there which some of your members might wish weren't there, but you've done that on behalf of the consumers. I think consumers might look to you and say, well, perhaps you can do more in highlighting cases of taking them forward. I think many of us as members of Parliament have been concerned that in spite of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of complaints, there's never been a prosecution. for breach of the rules. And I think that we would like to see the DMA actively working with Ofcom to bring forward prosecutions where people are breaking the rules.
Well, I think it's very important that the DMA works with the better people in the industry to make sure that we improve the behaviour of people doing calling, whether it be cold calling or otherwise. We need to make sure that people aren't frightened to pick up the phone, because however it may be done, whether it's through people having opt-in boxes on BT's documents or whatever, if the phone call is not welcome, then it causes aggravation. It's actually no good to anybody. It's no good to the people receiving nuisance calls, and it's no good to the people making them. So I very much welcome the fact that DMA is trying to improve the quality of calling in this country.
And I think we want to work with you, government wants to work with the DMA to make sure that we've got a legitimate industry here which can do its job, but which works in the interest of the consumers at the same time.